We are your hosts, Martina
and Gabby Roseman. And today we are going to be talking about obedience over sacrifice.
and I'm super excited about this
I
actually because
am
the
too.
Lord has been teaching us, well, especially me a
Woo!
lot, and I know she's been talking about it. So
Yes, I am ready. Yeah, so actually, this is our second time recording, so bear with us. We are learning. This is going to be a learning experience as we are in the midst of obedience over sacrifice in our everyday lives. And for me, this is one of my steps to obedience over sacrifice. Because I feel like I've been led to start this podcast to talk more about God in our generation and make it more, I guess, modern stuff that we face on the day to day. And so,
I think mine would be obedience too, in the terms of like when you ask me to do this, it'd be like being comfortable talking in front of people, being recorded. That it makes it's very much out of my comfort zone, but I feel like it's something that the Lord's used as an opportunity to grow me in that. So
for sure, for sure. And thank you. And I don't think I ever said thank you, but it's so funny because the place that we were, I actually, I don't know, it's so weird. So I found out that she was going to be working there, and God literally showed me a vision of myself going up to her, and I was like, "We're gonna start a podcast." Or when you start a podcast, and I remember the second day because she didn't really know how crazy I am. The second day she worked there, and I said to her, and she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Never mind." So maybe like a month later, I was like, "Would you start a podcast with me?" And she was just like, "Sure."
I don't care.
I was like, okay.
Oh, as the opposite of our personalities, I'm very chillax, calm, quiet person.
And I'm like,
Bubbly, outgoing, little like I think bunny rabbit would be.
I guess
I can be witty
she can be witty, but
in
as
a
far
calm manner.
yeah, but as far as like putting things out there to the public and on social media, I didn't used to be that way, but when I became a mother, I became super private. So it's like with
Mm.
y'all one way, but to the outside world, I don't even know if they know if I exist. But I used to be super heavy, like social media. My kid is trying his best to get in this room, but we is not gonna let him. He's like, "Here's Johnny." But yeah. But as far as doing this and actually publishing it, I don't know if that would be the correct word, but I'm actually nervous about that. But I know that
The Lord's
it's
will, it will happen.
exactly, and I know it's him molding me into. I don't really want to be an influencer. I don't know what it is. Honestly, I don't know what it is that God has for me, but I know He's molding me into the position that He wants me to be on whatever platform, whatever it is that He wants for me. He's like, do it. And it's been so many times that in the midst of starting the podcast, I stopped, or I was like, I don't like the way the backdrop looks, or I don't like the way this looks. And he's like, what are you doing? You doing it for? Are you doing it for me because this is what I told you to do, or are you doing it for the likeness of men? Like, what are you doing it for? So I have to remind myself each time. Like, I want my hair done, and he's like, what are you doing this for?
Mm.
And I'm just like, so I'm here and I'm present, and I don't know. If God is with us, then we're good, and that's all that matters, right?
That's true. I really think especially this like past week, the Lord, has been speaking to me on the idea of like obedience over sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Because you do hear a lot of sermons and a lot of things people say, oh, you got to sacrifice things. Yes, that is an aspect of it. But I think over more than so, we've been talking about how obedience is more important. Yes, you count the cost, but obedience is what the Lord's asking for you. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because obedience causes you to be on the altar. And that's something the pastor has said once at my church. And I really got me thinking because it's true. It makes us uncomfortable because it puts us on the altar. It puts us in the mirror. It shows us the things that the Lord's trying to like purify out of us. Like that's something that we got to put ourselves as the sacrifice. Our obedience is our like walking it out, walking our ways, things like that.
And I remember when we brought up the conversation. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, and I was like, if I had to choose, I was like, I think we should choose obedience over sacrifice. And I don't know if you remember what you were like, why, like how? It's like the same. And I was like, well, no, because your obedience is your will. You willingly doing something for God.
Not seeing it as something you begrudgingly have to do and
Yes.
complaining with a heart of complaining, things like that.
Yes. And as a sacrifice, you can be sacrificing something in your necessarily in your obedience because but it could be because you have to do it. You're being forced to do it. You can sacrifice something forcefully.
Basically, like religious.
Yes.
You know, like we were talking about, like the Old Testament, like, they did that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, like, one of the specific scriptures that Samuel mentioned for Samuel 15
Mm-hmm.
22, he said, but Samuel replied, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as obeying the Lord?
Mm-hmm.
To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. So even in the Old Testament, they had that view. It's like, yeah, we can sacrifice because, that's what they had to do as a placeholder because Jesus Christ hasn't, died on the cross yet. But they had this, like, basically like a substitute system. And so Samuel is like, obeying the Lord is better than sacrificing rams. That's what the Lord wants our hearts to be, is to walk in obedience to him, to walk in his commandments, to walk in his ways, to follow him. So
I love that. And something that I'm learning as well is that delayed obedience is still disobedience.
mm.
And it's like, whew, like that's not something you always think about. So I don't know, that was just random. But can you tell me about a time
In my life,
in your life that you obedience over sacrifice, or a time that you chose to sacrifice over obedience or delayed obedience?
oh, there's plenty of those. So I don't like pinpoint one. I would say for sure. Sorry, I'm thinking about it. I would say for sure, probably my freshman year of college or a sophomore year in college.
Mm-hmm.
So I started as a psychology major.
Mm-hmm.
It was very like, it was a degree that you could most likely get more money in
Yeah.
if I continued my education and got to end up being a counselor or whatever. But as I was growing closer to the Lord and going through my own things, I was, building my personal relationship with him. And the Lord has always implanted in me that prophetic voice and like being able to hear him clearly a lot. So like I'm always communicating with him and things like that. Now everyone has that, but I think some stronger than others in how he communicates, and he communicates differently. But I heard him clear as day say, I want you to move to a music major. And I'm like, why? I don't know how to sightseeing whatsoever. I don't have any kind of experience like majority of music majors. Like they, prepare all through a high school to sightseeing to be able to audition to get into music major, because you have to audition in front of like judges to get approved into the program.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it wasn't like Juilliard or anything crazy, but it's still pretty intimidating. But because of the Lord's favor, it was crazy to me because I look back and I'm like, what the heck? I was already in the choir because I was doing it as extracurricular activity.
Yeah.
And so they all just assumed I was already a music major. All the other students who were in choir were like, oh, when I told them I'm switching over to their music, they were like, we thought you were already a music major because I just fit so well into it. And I remember it was obedience to his day because as soon as he told me, I was like, okay. Like, even though it was uncomfortable, and I cried plenty of times in the piano room trying to like teach myself things I didn't even know, and I had to work harder than other students because I didn't know how to sightsing. I didn't know how to do oral skills, things like that. And I didn't even have to audition.
Ooh.
They just like kind of snuck into the background of the music major and just like somehow got in there, and then just boom, I was there.
Have you ever realized that until you didn't even have to audition?
I thought about it like once when I moved over, but like just thinking about it even more now, just how much in awe I am of how the Lord, when you obey him, makes opens doors and it makes things happen. And it's like not even for the traditional sense, because I never had the feeling of feeling like I wanted to be a music teacher. Granted, if he calls me later in life, for sure. But I did it because he had a calling on my life to lead worship, to write music, to write worship music, things like that. And so I was getting it for the knowledge aspects and learning how to like play the piano, learning keys, learning, things that I need that I look back now and I realize like was important. So I think that was for sure the one that stuck out the most about stepping out in obedience. And I didn't really see it as a sacrifice at the time. I just saw it as okay, the Lord told me, therefore I go and I'll do.
That's amazing. And the thing that stuck out to me was something that I'm learning is that when God calls you to do something, He moves. It's accelerated. So like how you didn't even have to audition. He's already told
It's
you
just
to do
like
it.
boom, there.
It's gonna happen. Just go where I told you to go. Like
Yeah,
do
he
it.
makes it happen.
Yeah, yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
So, how about you in terms of, I would say specifically, when was there a time that you delayed obedience? Since that's something that the Lord's teaching you, what specifically is there a time that you realize, man, I delayed and I kept telling him no, kept telling him no, kept telling him, and I don't hear him. No, I can't do that. No, I'm scared. No, I'm whatever. That's still delayed, and you're telling him no, which is disobedience. So, is there ever a time that you can think out?
Well, no. Most recently, most recently, I definitely have to say it was. I'm sorry, but it's like it only comes next. Like it's crazy. Yeah. I still have to say, like as of recently, selling a daiquiri shop. I eventually obeyed. There was still very much a delay um, because it was a lot of. I struggle with double mindedness, so it was a lot of being the first. I've always been an entrepreneur, but as far as the restaurant, it was like that was on a bigger scale, and I felt a lot of. It was just very scary being the first entrepreneur in my family, and from the outside looking in, it was like, why would you do that? It looked extremely successful, looked like a fun place, but inside, like I was miserable. I went into like a deep depression. It was just a lot going on, and he pretty much told me like, I mean, regardless, like if you're called to do something, it's not gonna be easy all the time. It's not gonna be peaches. It's not gonna be super easy. But in that case, he really set me down. It was like, I didn't call you to do this. So you can do it for as long as you like to, but you're going to still feel like this. When I give you something, you're going to see the fruits. And he was like, where's your fruit? He was like, you're mean to your kids because you're stressed out all the time. You're trying to do too much. I didn't, this is not what I wanted for you. So it was pretty much like, you can keep looking successful to the outside world, or you can be obedient and do what I told you to do, and you can receive what I want to give to you. And this is something I still struggle with now. I feel like he's calling me more. I kind of talk to you a little bit about it sometimes, but I feel like he's calling me more. It's definitely in a different route. I don't want to say too much about it because I feel like I'm in it right now, like of learning what he wants me to do. But yeah, that was definitely my most recent delayed obedience. And I still obeyed, but it was still delayed. And I feel like if I would have obeyed earlier, honestly, I feel like before I even opened the shop, if I would have talked to him before and asked him, hey, is this what you like? What do you think about this? Because I'm learning that he probably, I don't know what he would have said, but I think I know with me personally, he's forcing me to have that deeper connection with him. He's like, before you make a decision, I want you to ask me about it. Like he wants me to have that closeness to him instead of just doing what I think I'm supposed to do all the time. So I'm
Hmm.
learning.
Wow. Must have been, I know it must have been hard kind of sharing vulnerable, like, because people don't like talking about when they've disobeyed the Lord because they always want to talk about when they've done something right.
For
So it's
sure.
really hard. And I applaud you for that. But I think one of the things that stuck out
Thanks.
for that was when you were talking about how it looks, people think you're crazy when you step out and obey the Lord in terms of the worldly, because they see it and it's a complete opposite of the things the Lord is does or calls us to a lot of the times. Like missionaries or pastors, or like they're like, you what, you're getting paid, people have to pay you to go do something rather
Yeah.
than you getting money to do something. So it looks very crazy to people, but it's something the Lord calls us to because he calls us not to live like the world.
Realizing the path that he's putting me on. It was probably like this morning, I was like, you know what? I accept it. I realized that the path that he is putting me on, it's probably gonna seem very crazy to the outside people, but he also said in his word that my sheep hear my voice. So people who get it, they're gonna get it, and people who don't, they're not people that I really need to be around anyway. And I'm learning that,
Mm.
and definitely that's definitely totally opposite from. I mean, I'm growing, but he's definitely taken away the people pleasing spirit away from me, and for that I am extremely grateful because that is definitely something that I struggle with. And in the field, what he's calling me to do, I can't be a people pleaser.
I think we're on the same page. The things I think God's called me to, I cannot bring with that because there'll be things that I'll have to say or
Mm,
things I'll have to sing that or things I might have to do that might look crazy to people
for sure.
or they might not like to hear. But if the Lord's telling me, I can't care what they think because the God's judgment, God's approval is the only thing that matters, just like Galatians 1:10 says. So if we're servants of Christ, we don't live for the approval of people. And I have to preach myself to that all the time because I'm always having so much anxiety before I go up and lead a song or feel like the Lord's telling me to say something because like I'm worried that I'm gonna say something and someone's gonna get offended. But it's like that hinders you from stepping out and obeying the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge hindrance.
Yes. And I do, I feel like it is scary because I know the direction that he's calling me to be is totally opposite from my personality. We're talking about our personalities and the things that he gives me is like, it's super serious, it's to the point.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he wants me to root out situations and it's not always pretty. Like everybody wants to be like prophetic and give everybody like these lovely messages from the Lord, and it's like He gives me that sometimes, but most of the time it's not. It's like warnings, and it's like they need to do this, you need to tell them this, blah blah blah, and it's like me, why me? Like I was literally crying the other day. I was like, this is too much. Like this is. It's very uncomfortable, especially when you have that people pleasing spirit. It's like you don't want to hurt people's feelings, but it's really not hurting their feelings. And in a lot of cases, what I'm realizing, he showed me like that could be like life or death for that person, for their soul. And I'm telling you to tell these people something, so do it. That's a lot.
Mm. Yeah, that's what it reminds me of in college when I had this first instance where God really used my prophetic gift.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me to talk to this girl. And I remember like I was fasting during that time and I was like I thanked the Lord for her friendship because
Mm-hmm.
she actually reached out to me first in class because during that time I was struggling a lot with self-harm. So she saw my scars on my arms or whatever
Mm-hmm.
and was like, "Hey, if you ever need someone to talk to or whatever." But at that time I was already healed.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord already delivered me of that spirit and all these other things. And so I was just really appreciative and I was looking like wanted new friends. And so she was a friend. And he was like, "What makes you think that I brought her to you?" He's like, "Well, I brought you to her." And he's like, "Is someone's soul not more or is someone's soul should matter more than your uncomfortability?" And I was like, dang. And so remembering having to like go up and ask her for dinner and talk to her and the things that he revealed about her that I thought I was making up was completely true because she ended up revealing to me about it. And it was some very deep,
Mm-hmm.
hard, painful things that I was like, I wouldn't want to make up about someone because
For sure.
people doesn't want to go through that trauma.
No.
Anyway, but I remember that like, as a part of obedience, our uncomfortability should be put aside to do things that the Lord has called us to do. Like Moses had to step out, even though he was afraid of speaking. He had a fear of saying
That's
the wrong
me.
words. Yeah, he had the wrong words. He was like, "Lord, I can't do it. Send someone else." And the Lord was like, got mad and was like, "You're not following me. I called you. I said to you." He's like, "Why aren't you obeying? Why aren't you listening?"
Yeah.
And he ended up doing it. He ended up obeying because look, he Lord used him, and they all the Israelites got to go free and get out of captivity from Egypt, right?
Yeah, I'm
So
emotional right now. Damn, that's deep. But yeah, I think just because
you struggle with that.
I do, but I can relate to a lot right now. I'm realizing myself that it's like whole obedience over sacrifice. Like like that. That's the moment of my life that I'm in right now, and I feel like he's downloading so much to me right now, and
Mm.
like it's like he's doing so much to me right now that I have no choice but to like buckle down and only surrender to him because like nobody's really gonna understand. It's like he's building me up to where it's like I can only really come to him. So I think I'm in a wilderness. I'm in the beginning stages of, but I also know that that's something that I should be grateful for because I know coming out of that is what's gonna make me whatever it is.
I think I just got out of the wilderness
Mm-hmm.
and it was for like a year and a half. Granted, it still kind of is, but it's not so as intense as it was. And one of the things that I've been learning in terms of wilderness is we like to talk about all the great things going on in the Bible, like all the victories, and it's like you don't realize like we also need to hold to a standard as well. Suffering, the wilderness, those things that we have to walk through, that lessons are being learned, things are being taught. I was like David, for example, he didn't become king until like way later after going through getting chased down, trying to get someone, people are trying to murder him. Saul was trying to murder him out of jealousy. I was like, he was getting persecuted. He was going through depression. He was living in caves. He was eating all this stuff that he shouldn't have to until finally he became and was crowned king of Israel. And it's like all of that you see is the process of the Lord bringing him through things to teach him on how to be king. And it's like it took all that time, and he went through that whole wilderness.
Goliath, that's a whole nother. Bro, he was a teenager.
Yeah.
Against a giant, and then like when I think of David and Goliath, I think of like the slingshot, and it's like God will equip you because it wasn't really the slingshot; it was that he was obedient to the Lord,
and the Lord worked through him. Exactly. It had nothing to do with David. People like to talk about how it's David. He just simply obeyed like all of us should. It was like who was the real power? Who had the real glory there? The Lord.
Yeah. He could have had a paper plane, and whatever he did,
the Lord would have killed that guy.
So it was just like, if you're obedient in your battles, you already know you had the victory, and that's something that I'm in my wilderness. Is like, okay, like if I know that I'm being obedient, I'm just gonna sit in it. And I know coming out of it, I'm gonna have the victory.
A lot of things just like Jesus, he talks about. I feel like that's something I also been learning as well. Is just we fight from a place of victory, not for victory. So it's like Jesus already got that victory when he defeated death and took back the keys of Hades. I was like, because of what he did, what the Lord, God sent his son down to bring that sacrifice, to die on the cross for our sins, to make us righteous. Because there's no other way we could be righteous in heaven except through Jesus, not through our own works, none of that. And I was like, because of his sacrifice in that victory, we have the authority in the spiritual realm. So
that's something I'm learning too, especially like in my prayers. I always start my prayers off with like repentance and thanking him. And then after I ask or pray for whatever or about whatever, it's not always asking him whatever the case is, whatever the prayer is for. It's always like at the end, it's like we're thanking him because it's like I already know whatever I have the victory, whatever I'm asking for. So you know what? Thank you, Lord, for my aid, or because it's already done. He said, "You ask and you shall receive." So it's already done, and that's where your faith comes in. So either believe I'm going to get it done or I'm not. That's up to you. But yeah, when did you realize that God was real, or did you always just think that God was real?
Mine would most likely have been when I was a teenager. So that was when I was going through really a lot of hard stuff at home or whatever. And so I went to church camps, and I remember going to the service that they were doing, and they were asking a simple question like, do you want to get filled with the baptism of the Holy Spirit? You want to get, receive tongues, things like that. And I simply went up there to the front in the altar to receive that. But the Lord had other ideas, of course, because he says, if you draw near to him, he'll draw near to you. And he's like, the Lord says that he's looking to and fro for people's hearts who turn towards him. I always remember like I wanted my heart to be towards him, even though I was going through all this hard stuff. I wanted to find him because I needed some type of hope. So I went up to that altar, and this lady came up to me. And it was the first time that the prophetic was used towards over me. The Lord used that gifting, not realizing years later I was going to be the one who's going to be working in that. So to be able to be the person who gives encouragement to other people, to show them that the Lord is there with them, that when they're going through those things, that he's real. or whatever. And so she said something that no one would ever know except the Lord. And she said, I'm praying over you, and the Lord just wants to tell you that he sees you crying yourself to sleep every night, and he knows that he's there and that you're not alone. And so it's just like it's not even the fact that he said that he wanted to take me out of my suffering. He said he was there with me. And that's all I wanted to know. And I think then and there I knew he was real because no one could have ever known that about me. Then make up stuff like that. I was like, okay, the Lord's proving himself to me by showing me that he does exist, that he is real. It's not just like church going to escape home. It wasn't just another outlet to escape home, but that he was a real, tangible God that I wanted to obey.
Well, I know that we're cutting it close, but we're gonna do our best to upload at least twice a month.
About twice a month, just because we're both busy schedules. We have a lot of church commitments and work commitments and family commitments for her, and just personal things. And
Yeah.
so we're going to try to do twice a month for sure. We're going to commit to twice a month, especially in the new year starting.
Yeah. So
Hopefully after the holidays, everything will settle out a little bit better, and I think we'll have more time.
yeah. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to doing many more.
See ya.
Bye.